Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Your Journey to the SAP Cloud, Reduce Implementation Time and Cost with SpinifexIT Suite. I am Vanessa, and joining me shortly is our host and presenter, Brendon Andrews Warmuth. Before we begin, I'd share with you some tips and reminders so you can maximize this session. You are currently using the GoToWebinar viewer, where you'll be seeing the main presentation screen and the GoToWebinar panel. This is the GoToWebinar panel, something similar to yours. If you have any questions throughout the session, just type your inquiries in the questions box and then click send. Time permitting, we'll have them answered during our Q&A session. Now, if you have additional questions after the webinar, please send them over to info@spinifexit.com and we'll answer you promptly. This webinar is recorded. An on-demand version for this webinar will be available within the next 48 hours. Interested attendees who were not able to register can also access a rerun of this webinar by going to our website at www.spinifexit.com/video around 48 hours after this webcast. So that's all for our guidelines. I will now hand you over to Brendon. Brendon?
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thanks for attending, everybody, today. So we're going to talk about the journey to the cloud and how we can help make that life easier for you. So let's get straight into it, and we'll have a look at the agenda to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today. So first off, we'll just do a little company overview, as we usually have some extra stuff to talk about ourselves before we get started. I'm going to talk about the different SAP system landscapes you can expect as you move to the cloud systems, the life cycle of actually moving to those clouds, and how Easy Reporter specifically fits in with that life cycle, how it can help make it easier. Then I'll give you a little demo of Easy Reporter, and we'll run some reports with some Employee Central data so you can see exactly what we were talking about in those previous areas. And I'll give you a little sneak peek of the new Payroll Control Center functionality that's going to be coming out soon. And as Vanessa mentioned, towards the end there, we've got a bit of time at the end for questions and answers, so make sure you fire those through. So let's go. So a little bit about SpinifexIT. We've been working with a lot of customers who are looking at moving into the cloud recently. You know that we've been a certified partner and developer for quite a long time now, over about a decade now. And so we are really experienced with on-premise systems, and now we're getting a lot of work to work with the cloud systems as well. What you might not know is that we're actually the only reporting add-on approved to work within SAP Employee Central Payroll. So all of our products, all of our on-premise products are currently approved to be run in the Employee Central Payroll environment. So as customers move to the cloud, what we've noticed is that there's still a bit of a gap in reporting on transactional data in SAP. We know that that's always been historically an issue, but what we're finding is that even moving to these new wonderful cloud systems, you're still going to find that same issue. There's a lot of tools to allow you dump data, but there's not so many tools that allow you to build reports, to process that data and give you meaningful output. So we've taken all of our past experience with those SAP reports and the tools that you know us for, and we've applied those to use in SuccessFactors and some of the nicer reporting styles as well. So what you're going to see today is we're going to talk about moving to Employee Central, how to do it faster and easier, and how we can work with you on that. And we're always going to follow that same standard mantra that we always do, is we want to make our tools easy to use for you and easy to install so that you can see the return on investment in your systems that you hope for as quick as possible. So let's get to the HCM landscapes overview. So we've got to do, I'll just do a quick brief here so that everybody's on the same page in terms of what to expect when they move to the cloud, because obviously there's a few different ways you can do this, and I know that there's sometimes a little bit of confusion because let's be honest, nobody makes it easy for us when they explain these things sometimes. So the first landscape that we normally expect is the hybrid and cloud payroll model. So generally speaking, if you're running SAP right now, you've got your on-premise SAP box, and that's got the payroll, time, benefits, all those standard modules that you'd expect. you might also have Employee Central, and if you do, that's obviously in the cloud, and you've got some kind of connection between those, whether it be point-to-point integration, some of the other integration, there's all sorts. The scenario on the right is a bit more of a real jump to the cloud, where you've gone and said, yep, we're going to have Employee Central HR. We're also going to go ahead and use SAP's Employee Central Payroll. So in that case, it's a little bit different. All the master data lives in Employee Central, and the payroll is processed out of SAP's Employee Central Payroll. The big thing to remember there is that essentially the ECP environment is the same as an old on-premise SAP environment in the ECC world. So it's the same engine and the same data, but the big change of it is that you're letting someone else host it and run those servers for you. So we can provide the ability to use our tools within those systems. So where you see this on the left-hand side, the on-premise SAP systems, that's where you would expect our solutions to be run from. And on the right-hand side, instead of running in your on-premise system, which might now be your finance system or your materials management, for example, now we're going to run our systems in the our solutions in the ECP system. And all of our solutions, as I mentioned before, are certified to do so. So what you might then find in another common model that's coming out, if we just jump to the next slide, is the S4HANA. So people are talking a lot about this. They're thrown around kind of interchangeably, HANA and S4HANA. HANA, the important thing is just a database that sits behind SAP, whereas S4 is SAP's new business suite. So that includes simple finance, logistics, and they're also working on more products as well. That runs only on a HANA database. S4HANA does include the same payroll, time, and benefits that we'd usually expect. So that hasn't been changed, where the simple finance and simple logistics has been a big change. The payroll and time is still similar. So you may be going through and looking at S4 solutions, and you might also be looking at Employee Central. In that case, you'd look like the diagram on the left, where you've still got your S4 on-premise system, and it's connecting to an Employee Central system. Very similar to what we talked about before in the hybrid situation, just that in this case it's a newer business suite and it's on a different database. On the right-hand side, we're looking at the real full SAP HANA cloud solution. So that's where you've got a cloud-based S4 HANA system, so you no longer have any on-premise systems. You've got ECP in the cloud to run your payroll, and you've got Employee Central for your master data. So that's really the full cloud option. Definitely, if you are looking to go full HANA, that's a definite option. But again, as we talked about with the previous slide, you can see the SpinifexIT solutions live perfectly happy on an on-premise S4 HANA box, or they can live in your cloud-based S4 HANA ECP box as well. So let's talk about how you would migrate to these different landscapes. So there are, and like we talked about, a number of different options, but we want to try and make it a little bit easier for you. So if we talk about the standard migration lifecycle, so in the next slide, what we'll see is that what you'd usually expect. First thing to kind of always remember is the move to the cloud, it's nothing really new or special. It's essentially just a system migration. With any system migration, you'd usually expect to have these 4 key steps. We're going to do some data cleansing, some data translation, and then load, some data synchronization, and then of course, business as usual, so continued business processes. What we're going to assume here is that you're going to be moving data from an existing SAP system into a similar landscape like what we talked about earlier. But obviously, there's a lot of different ways that there's varying ways you can set that up and different integration points and things like that. We're just focusing on those 4 most popular concepts. So if we have a look here, data cleansing usually would be described as having a real deep look at your data, finding records that are missing or invalid, making sure that all the data that you need to move to your new system is provided, because you don't want to move and end up with a system with not such good data. Then there's the data transformation and load. So we're going to take that now clean data and fire it off into the new system. Oftentimes that's going to involve translation of your data. So for example, if you've got a gender field in SAP right now, that's stored as a number 1 or a number 2. In Employee Central, it's stored as an M or an F. So there's a little bit of translation there. Some of the translations are obviously a bit more complex than that, but that's a nice simple example. Then the next point, not always relevant for all types of migrations, but in this case it's important. That's the data synchronization. So when you start to use Employee Central alongside an SAP system, you have to make sure that the data is in sync. So there's some data coming down from Employee Central to your SAP system. Employee Central being, of course, the source of truth in the future for your HR data. You've got to make sure that the right data comes back so that when pay is run, the right pay information is used. And then finally, once you get to your new system, of course, you've got to continue on with those business processes you're doing today. Your compliance, your audit, your period reporting, headcount reporting, so on and so on. None of that's going to change just because you've got a new system. You're still going to have those requirements, if not potentially even more. So let's just take a quick look at some of the data to get an idea of how this would play out usually. So we want to make sure we understand the data. So it's important to remember that SAP ECC, the old HR system of choice, and Employee Central, the new system, are a little bit different. Obviously, the structure of the data is different, and even the values in some of those fields are different. Things like you'll see on this screen, department, division, location. Usually we might be able to kind of figure out what those are based on some ECC data. We might have different levels in the organizational structure. We might have different fields that we use, but generally speaking, we don't have a one-to-one mapping for those fields. So if we looked at a ECC screen, for example, what we'll see is similar kinds of data, but not that one-to-one simple mapping. So it's very important to remember that this is going to obviously impact the data load, the data validation, and more importantly, your general reporting. Because if you're doing reporting out of this system, you've got different fields. If you're doing reporting out of EC, different again. And depending how you need to break data up for your business, it's obviously going to make a bit of a difference there. So using Easy, what we're going to do now is have a look at how Easy Reporter can help mitigate any risks and help you simplify your migration. So what we'll talk about is data cleansing and loads. So the first few steps in that process that we talked about, that 4-step process. So as far as we go, we can just jump to it. Yep, thank you. So when you are moving your data from SAP ECC, basically what you'll find is there's a tool within Employee Central called the Import Employee Data tool. With this, you essentially get a nice set of templates, flat files, and CSVs, and it allows you to populate those templates and upload the data into the different areas of Employee Central. So those different areas might be things like the job information, the compensation information, so on and so on. There's quite a few. I think there's about 32 odd different files that you can upload. What we're trying to do is show you how you can use Easy Reporter to provide that data out of SAP ECC to be uploaded into Employee Central. So you don't have to go and populate that data manually. You don't have to go and add that code to output interface files. You can do it all within Easy Reporter to allow you to really build that up fast and tweak them as you need to. And even better, we've actually got a lot of those templates already built that we can help you to use. So if we look at the next part of that phase, it's fine to say it's simple to build a particular field. The next part is it's important to remember that you're going to have to translate some of that data. So the Easy Reporter interface builder that we've talked about before doesn't require any coding to use. All you need to do is take a report that you've created and ask it to output in a particular file format that you're after. In this case, it's just a CSV, a nice straightforward file. Some of the other things, though, that you actually have the ability to do in the interface builder are important. They allow you to translate that data directly. So you can see there's an example here where it might be that in your SAP ECC system, you've got a personnel area. You've decided that you need to use that to determine your division, for example. So how do you know what area is what division? And you can see quite quickly there we've taken personnel area 3000 and we're renaming that to Northeast. So in the CSV file, we're getting the data that EC needs to understand the employee. The other thing we can do is we can find the issues with the data. So when it comes to data cleansing, if you've got improper characters, things like that, there's two steps. We can actually find the data and have someone go and then fire out a report to someone who's going to go and maintain that and update it and tidy it up. Or we can actually use the replacement and some of the mapping functionality in the tool to clean that data up automatically. Kind of depends on the phase of the data migration that you're in and the auditability and things like that that you need about particular data. But you've got a lot of options and it makes life a lot easier. So if we jump to the next one, so this is actually what we've built for one of our existing customers where they were moving through to Employee Central and they needed to create all of those different interface files. So you can see essentially it's just a single report for each section of data, and then you use the interface option to output that data to CSV. We've got a pretty good library of these so far, and we're looking at helping to share those with everybody. There is a little bit of work required to customize these. The great thing about the Import Employee Data tool is it will provide you with a template. So if you customize a specific area of Employee Central, say for example you've got a new field in job information, and you output the job template, that new field will be included. What you'll find is obviously our pre-delivered version won't, but it's pretty easy to just go and add a new field and then output that as you need to. So it's pretty, we've got a great starting point, I think is the important thing. You might be thinking then, okay, so we've got all the master data through, but what do we do about the payroll data? So we've also got a tool for that, and that's EasyClone. So generally speaking, EasyClone's well known for its ability to push data from a production system down to a test or a development system, possibly a training system. If you've got an RFC between two systems, you can send data between them. But you can also bring over payroll results and whatever input type. So this can be used to migrate some data from your on-premise system to an SAP system, for example. Generally speaking, you'll find that info type data is going to be handled through replication or the migration process. But if you ever need to take over payroll history, well, that's a different story, and that's a lot more difficult without a tool like EasyClone. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you've got with data replication and synchronization. So you've put the data in to Employee Central. Now there's going to be a feed which takes that data and provides it back down to SAP Payroll. Generally it's point-to-point integration, or it might be Boomies, or whatever the case may be. It depends on when you go live, as there always seems to be a new technology coming out for this. So you're always going to have some similar issues. So let's again just talk about understanding the data and have a look at that same example. Here we're looking at an employee's organizational structure, and we're looking at the location. The location in this particular system sees Sydney, and you'll see it's AU_SID. When it comes to your SAP side, it's unlikely that you've got that particular value. You've probably got something like a combination of personnel area and sub-area. So if we had a look at the SAP data on the next slide, what we'll see is that this particular employee has had that data replicated down, and in this case it's created the personnel area of New South Wales and the sub-area of Parramatta to correspond to that particular value in Employee Central. So okay, great, the replication worked, so that's good news. We've got the right information set for that employee. Of course, it's not always going to be that simple. If something fails, you're going to get an error log potentially and you'll be notified. But then if it does fail, how do you know if it's been fixed? How do you check that? And then, yeah, for whatever reason, sometimes you're not always notified either. So what we're going to look at, so the impacts of that data replication. So if we have a look at the next slide, excuse me, it's important that we make sure that what is replicated through is coming through correctly. So with Easy Reporter, you can really speed up the time it takes to test that process. You'll probably have scenarios like we talked about where you're comparing two different things, apples and oranges in a sense, and you need some way to do that, some technology that allows you to map those values and say yes, they're the same. Another example would be the employee status, which in Employee Central for active would have a code of 1801, but in SAP we know that active is 3. So that's two different values, but how do we say that yes, in the case where those two are different, they're the same and it's okay? When you actually go live, you need to be confident that that data is in sync. So using the same processes as you defined during your implementation, you can continue to process throughout your production or throughout your business as usual. Maybe run the process every time before you run a payroll to make sure that every day is there, or even if you want to be really confident, you can run it every day and make sure that everything's fully up to date. Either way, you need to make sure that you're confident the data is correct. So we've covered 3 out of those 4 process steps, and the last one, which is equally important as all of those, is the ongoing business operations. So we've talked about performing those synchronization checks after go live, but actually really you probably purchase the tools more to help you extract the data out of SAP and Employee Central. So let's, for a brief moment, imagine that you don't have Easy Reporter and you've done all of those previous steps manually. So you've done your migration, you've moved to the cloud, you're feeling really good about how great it's going to be once you get there. There's some new tools, it's a much better interface, and SAP's really hyped it up. So let's take a look at the pre-delivered reporting options you're going to get when you get there. So the very first one, and probably the most basic, is something we'd probably all be familiar with if we've done any reporting in SAP on-premise, and that's ad hoc query. This is essentially the same as what you'd expect to see in your on-premise module. It can report across different SuccessFactors modules, including Employee Central, but you can see there's a whole list of other ones as well. But if we jump through, we'll see that the way that it works is very similar to what we expect in on-premise. You get a big long list of fields, you double click those ones that you're after, and that will show on the end there that we've selected a few columns, first name, middle name, last name. And if we were to output that report, what we'll see is that it just dumps that out into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's very similar to your standard SAP on-premise style reports. You don't get any, you get a little bit of filtering and selection, but you're not really getting any ability to use that data in any kind of insightful way. It's just a dump out of a table, similar to what you expect in standard SAP. The other tool that you do get though delivered, and this one's a bit nicer, is the ORD query, the Online Report Designer. That allows you to query data and do a little bit more, as well as doing some visualizations, but it's still just looking at Employee Central data. So if you need to bring in payroll data into your reports, then that's just not possible. It's not accessible via either of these tools. So as far as the SAP delivered solutions go, so essentially what's happened is you've moved your system to the cloud, but you've still got the same problems you had in your on-premise environment. You've got different tools to access different data. It's great that you've still got those standard tools. So even if you're using EC Payroll, you can still use Wage Type Reporter. You can still use the payroll Wage Type Statement and Payroll Recon reports. But you're going to have to dump down that data out of payroll to be able to get that back into join up with data from Employee Central. It's not the best way of doing it, and we've all struggled with that in the past with running ad hoc query and running Wage Type Reporter in the on-premise environment. What you want to do really is if you've moved to this nice new cloud and you've got all these nice new systems, wouldn't it be great if you had one way to report on both sets of data? And if you have Easy Reporter, the good news is you do have that ability. So we've integrated reports with SuccessFactors data and SAP data, and I can show you that, how it works. It's obviously, as we know, the best-in-class tool for reporting on payroll transactional data, always has been, but it's the only tool that's going to allow you to bring up that combination of data. We often get workforce analytics mentioned. People say, oh, that's the tool to report on across the board every single data source. But that's a very complex solution. It's quite expensive, and it's really not a transactional tool. It's more of a strategic operational tool. It's more of your business warehouse style tool. So it's a little bit different. So if we just jump through, okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the data. So here's another example where the customer is replicating certain data down from Employee Central. And you can see what they've had to do to make it match one-to-one is create a whole lot of different information on that info type to match it up. They've had to create some custom fields, and now they're using point-to-point integration to pull that down, which is fine. That's one way of doing it. And the point-to-point integration in EC Payroll is pretty good. It provides quite a lot out of the box, but obviously it's not going to provide everything. So if you do need to report on some of the data that's not in those areas, what are you going to do? And the simple answer is that you're going to find that. So what we'll find is that there's a lot of impacts from that replication. We need to make sure that it's going to work for all of our reports. The data is available across those reports. So there's a lot of fields that are common to your reports that may not be replicated, or maybe they are replicated, but they look slightly different, and various things there. So when you've got mission critical reports that require some of that information, it's important that you can pull that through from Employee Central. What we recommend generally is that if you do have that mission critical information, say it's something like division, if you can try to replicate that down. We can pull the data from Employee Central, but it does tend to slow down your reports a little bit. Now, that's not something that we have any control over. What we've experienced that with people writing ABAP reports directly from Employee Central as well as using our tools. It's just the nature of connecting to a very separate environment to access that data. So we're a little bit careful there. But you don't have to worry, because even if you're not replicating that data, you do always have the ability to pull it down. It's just that it's going to be a lot faster if you do have that data replicated. So just make sure, probably the key part to keep an eye on is any changes to your org structure, because that generally obviously impacts on all of your reporting, and we don't want to lose any data, and we don't want to miss out on any of that reporting. Excuse me. So if we jump through the next. So the other thing that is definitely going to help with your ongoing maintenance and even in the project mode is the ability to create interfaces out of Easy Reporter without having to write ABAP code. So we've had, obviously did a webinar on this I think it was last month or the month before, to show people how to use this interface. It's a very powerful tool. It really allows you to just simply create a report and build an interface file, tell us where the fields you want, whether you want them to go, what type of file format, just output them. You can really send that data across to any other system. It really helps you save time and money with the system integrator, as you can do a lot of that work yourself. And the other thing that Easy Reporter will allow you to do, it's obviously going to allow you to improve those ongoing business operations as well. So you really get the control. That's the thing that we've always been very big on. It's going to allow you to rapidly update your existing reports and just add that Employee Central data. So you might have a whole lot of reports on SAP on-premise, and all of a sudden now they all need the division added. Well, that's easy. With Easy Reporter, it's just a single field you need to drag on. You may have a whole lot of ABAP reports that you want to rebuild. Well, with Easy Reporter, it's going to really save you a lot of time doing that. You can, like we talked about, build those master data load files to populate Employee Central a lot quicker. And you can really make sure that the data is in sync during the implementation. So using that, after the data is loaded, using the master data load files, make sure that that data is as you expect, as well as once they turn on the integration. And most importantly, what we really always say is important is that allows you to own your own system. So you can really build using our end user tools. You don't have to have another company in there doing the work all the time. It really allows you to do your own thing. So if we jump through, so it's really easy to implement. All you need to do is create a user within Employee Central to access the API. we set up a RFC and SAP to connect to that and generate the fields into Easy Reporter. And then when you're in your SAP system, all you need to do is build the reports using those fields. The reports can be displayed and run in SAP GUI, or you can actually set up a tile in SuccessFactors as well. And if you want to, you can use our UI5 homepage. Some people have probably already seen that. It's a nice Fiori-based tile system, similar to what you'd see on the SuccessFactors homepage. You do still need to be careful here that everybody needs to still have an SAP ID, because obviously it's using that SAP authorization to provide that information. It's pretty standard to expect that from a SSNSS perspective anyway. Okay, so let's jump over to a quick demonstration. So I'll show you some examples of the different things that we've talked about.
All right, please hang in there while I change presenter. Switching over to you.
So you should be able to see an SAP screen here now. And what I'm showing you here is I'm an Easy Reporter, and here's some of those examples that we talked about earlier on, if you want to build those data load files. So you can see essentially what we've got is a single file for each of those different areas that we know we need to load. And like I talked about, this will vary a little bit depending on what you're using in your system. You can have custom fields, you might not need to load certain parts of data, etc. But essentially all these are is some very basic reports that are going to bring out data from our SAP on-premise system, output them into that CSV format, and they can be loaded directly into the Employee Central environment. And again, like we talked about, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a need for some translation of the data, and you'll know some of the different tools that we have available in Easy Reporter will really make that easier. You can see, for example, that we've got a mapping field that's determining our nickname. So if somebody's provided a known as, then we can use that. If not, let's use the first name, that type of thing. We've got a translation of the gender. So in SAP, the gender is saying male or female, and in Employee Central, we just want it to say M or F. So we're just going to cut out the first part of that string. So you can really quickly build up those rules and translations and output those files to load that employee data very simply. The next part that's very important that we talked about is the data validation. So once that data has been loaded into the Employee Central system, we want to check that it's okay. And then especially once we turn on the integration, we want to make sure that the integration is sending down the data correctly, and even ongoing into the future business as usual process. It'll be important to make sure that all this data is correct. So what you can see on your screen here is we're looking at some data from SAP. So there's the first name in SAP on-premise. Here's the first name in Employee Central. And we're saying, does it match or does it not match? And in most of the cases, it doesn't. So we've got some serious synchronization problems going on here. Last name as well, you'll see, same concept. And then here's the ones where things get a little bit more interesting. So one of the other examples we talked about was the employment status. In SAP, we can see it's a code of 3 for active. In Employee Central, it's 1801 if they're active, or 1803 if they're inactive. So we need to first translate that down. So we say 1801 should actually be a 3 in SAP. 1803 should be a 0 in SAP. And then we can check that those match. So we're comparing two slightly different bits of data, but making sure that they are as we expect. So that really helps you to validate your data as you go through your process. And then the last brief example I'll show you here is that, like we talked about, you're bound to want to run some reports across your payroll data. That's standard. That's what we mostly use Easy Reporter for now. But if you need to also include data from SuccessFactors, then how do you go about doing that? And what you'll see here in this report is a payroll register. And this payroll register has some information coming out of payroll. These are our wage types, the gross, net, 401k, this is an American report. And then you'll see the data from SuccessFactors. So we've rolled that report up using the division and the department and the company code from SuccessFactors. So it's very straightforward to do that. What I'll just quickly show you now is if I jump into this report. So the beauty of this solution is that it's much like what we'd normally expect from Easy Reporter. Employee Central essentially just becomes another data source that we can access easily within Easy Reporter. So we're used to seeing master data and payroll and so on and so on. Now you'll see in this particular system, we've also got a folder for Employee Central, and we can drill down into that, and we'll see we've got the person info, and we've got all sorts of different information about that person. And that's all pulling data directly from the Employee Central system. So any of your reports that need to kind of bring in that data, we can go and do that. And it's, as we talked about, there's a lot of different times you'll find, no doubt, where you need to do that. So that's it for the demo.
Okay, do you see my slides now? We are back in the deck.
Yep.
All right.
Good, thank you very much. So that's hopefully given you a nice overview of how we can help you with that move to the cloud. Now we're going to give you a little bit of a taste of something that you might be hearing a bit more about. A lot of the times when customers are moving to Employee Central, one of the cool things they want to use in that new system is the Payroll Control Center. And what goes along with that is the declustered payroll results. So first, let's talk a little bit at a high level about PCC, declustered payroll, and HANA. So in order to support the Payroll Control Center, SAP wanted to find a faster way to report on the data. So at the moment, SAP is storing their payroll data in a cluster. It's not really what you would term a normal old database table. It's sort of a tables within tables, probably is the simplest way to think about it. And you can't actually directly query that data. It's very hard to say, tell me all employees who made over $2,000, for example. You have to actually read each employee one by one, find what they earned, and then check if it was over a certain amount. You can't just query it exactly. So what they've done is brought out this declustered payroll solution, and this will replicate your payroll data into a proper transparent table. That allows you to really quickly query the data. So when you run your Payroll Control Center, it really helps speed up the exceptions and running simulations and things like that, so you can really check your data a lot faster. One thing that's really important to note is you don't actually have to have the HANA environment to use Payroll Control Center. SAP recommends you have HANA and recommends that you use the declustered payroll results, but you can use PCC without it. It's just going to be a lot faster and a lot simpler if you have all three of those solutions together. So it's the thing is, if you don't have HANA and you use the declustered results, it's certainly going to be faster than using the clusters, but only marginally faster. If you have HANA and declustered, then it's just insanely fast. Reports that would normally take half an hour will take 2 seconds. It's just that kind of fast. So let's have a little bit of a look at Payroll Control Center for those who haven't seen too much about it. Basically what it is a new processing center. So it gives you some nice defined steps and allows you to step through your payroll process from all the way from starting to releasing to checking errors, so on and so on. It's a really nice process model, and it doesn't allow you to skip steps or miss things out, things like that. So it's nice, and it means you can run your payroll without having to go into the SAP GUI. So one of the big parts of the Payroll Control Center, if we jump to the next slide, is the error checking. So when the process is run, the payroll is run, and then it automatically executes a whole lot of exception reports. So just like we were talking about, find all of our employees who had a net over a certain amount, find all of our employees who had a claim, or those types of things. So SAP includes a number of different exceptions within the tool. There's about 20, 25 of those. What they don't tell you though is that any additional exceptions that you want to build have to be written in ABAP code. They have to be custom coded. Then there's no integration with any of the other reporting tools that SAP provides. So what we've found, we've done a couple different reviews, we've done 2 implementations of this so far, is that those 20 that SAP delivers are just not going to meet your requirements. And think about all the different reports that you would normally run in a particular payroll. Well, you can guess that probably not even half of those will be already provided. What Easy Reporter allows you to do is actually just build a report and link it into the Payroll Control Center to detect those exceptions. So the report, as opposed to some custom ABAP code, is now the way that you identify those exceptions. And you can see in our example on the screen here that we've set up a couple different ones. We've got one employee who we've identified had an overpayment, and we've identified a number of other employees who are sitting in some invalid positions. So that's just a simple report that you could build in Easy Reporter. I'm sure you can imagine how simple a report like that would be. And then we just link it into PCC, nice and straightforward. The next great thing about the integration that we're providing is we've also given you the ability to go beyond that. So normally in an exception check, the standard SAP ones, you would drill down on that information and you would see a list of employee numbers. That's it. That's all the information that you get. What we're allowing you to do is say, I need to investigate that exception, click a button, and it will provide you with a UI5 menu. So this is our UI5 delivery that we usually provide as part of the tool right now. But we're allowing you to use that within the Payroll Control Center as well. So you can say, I need to investigate why this employee's net was over $2,000. Click on that employee, and it will give you a breakdown of all the different gross wage types that they had. Or you could view their pay slip, or whatever it is that you need. So it really allows you much more visibility to get into that data via Payroll Control Center. Otherwise, what we've often found is the process tends to be, okay, we identified a whole bunch of exceptions in Payroll Control Center. Let's go and select those employee numbers, jump over to the GUI and investigate them there. Sort of kind of defeats the purpose a little bit if you have to do that. So just a quick summary of the benefits of using Easy Reporter with Payroll Control Center. So like we said, no writing ABAP code, it's always a bonus. You've got all those same data sources you'd normally expect, your HR, payroll time. If you're using Employee Central, you can even build exceptions based on that data if you need to. And you can really do those more powerful, complex business rules as well. Not just not the basics of over $1,000, but you know, if they had this wage type and that wage type, and it was over a certain amount, those types of things. And you can really tweak those a lot quicker and add and change them as you need to. And the other thing you can do is, the other integration point is you can actually just execute a full report directly from there. So you don't have to only use it for exceptions. You could trigger off your external vendor files from Payroll Control Center. You can trigger off any report that you like and integrate it that way. So if we just get to the next slide, and let's just talk about, in summary, the bottom line of all of this. So what we're talking about is we provide an SAP certified solution that's really going to help you move your data and business to the cloud, and we know that it works. We've done it with a number of customers already. We've got a lot of experience with the on-premise world, and we've definitely jumped straight into the cloud as well. So if you're looking at any moves to the cloud, you want some more information, definitely come and talk to us, because we know we've seen a number of our customers do these things already, and we can give you advice. And we're happy to help you pull apart your reporting process and assess what it will take, what needs to change, what the impact will be of certain data replications, losing certain pieces of data, those types of things. And we already have some of those interfaces available. So you saw that list that we had, and we're adding to that and really making that a lot easier to use, so that you'll be able to go ahead and make the most of it as well. So I hope that you've got some valuable information out of the session today. I think about now we can hand over for any questions.
For now, we have 3 questions, Brendon. The first one would be, sure. Can reports be delivered off Employee Central after go live?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking about, we do have a UI5 solution available, and part of that solution is integration into SuccessFactors. So you can create a tile either on the Employee Central, usually just on the employee's home screen, and that tile can link through to our UI5 functionality. So it can be used for employee self-service reports and documents, manager self-service reports and documents, or also if you ever wanted to run for, say you've got a payroll administrator who does all their work through there, they can have a tile set up for them as well that lets them execute any reports that they like.
Our second question is, does Easy Reporter work with custom fields?
Yeah, so it's not that uncommon for people when they move to Employee Central to have to set up a number of different custom fields. The great thing about the way that we're accessing the Employee Central data is the API that SAP provides will automatically expose all of those custom fields. So when you generate the link between Easy Reporter and Employee Central, all of those fields in Employee Central, including any custom fields, will automatically be pulled through into Easy Reporter to be available in the reports.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is, when is the Payroll Control Center functionally available?
Oh yes, so that is available right now. We recommend if you want to use that, get in touch. The most recent release, R1, was where we really enhanced it to use that cool UI5 functionality. So if you're not on that release yet, you want to use Payroll Control Center, we definitely recommend jumping up to that and having a look and getting in touch with us to show you how it's done.
Okay, thank you so much for answering those questions. So I'll just flash the former slide that we used for our bottom liner for the summary of our slides. Once again, thank you so much, Brendon. Thank you everyone for attending. And if you would like to view other webinars that we have pre-recorded before, just go to our website at www.spinifexit.com/video. You will be also able to see our events or the rest of our webinars for March at our events page at www.spinifexit.com/event. So this concludes our webinar. Thank you everyone and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.